Welcome to Excel Basics video number 14. Hey, in this video, we got to talk about the amazing Excel VLOOKUP function. And it is going to be amazing. We have 9 examples. Now, just to start off, last video we did the if function, and this is what we want to avoid. We do not ever want to have to do an if where we have to check multiple items. So last video we did if to put one of 2 things into the cell. In this video we'll get to see the VLOOKUP function. Such simplicity, such an important function in business. And VLOOKUP will be what we will use anytime we have 3 or more items to put into a cell. Now, here are the amazing topics we have in this video. And before we go look at each one of those examples, let's go look at what we did last video, and we'll compare it to what we're going to do in this video. So I'm going to click on the sheet if or VLOOKUP. So F2, this is what we did last video. We checked a particular sales number. We had a test. We asked the question, is it greater than or equal to, and our hurdle was 20,000. Then we put one of 2 things into the cell. But this video, we want to see how to do this, but not with the if function. Notice the if function has to check every one of these conditions. And in business, this is oftentimes the way commissions work. You get a larger bonus commission as your sales increase. So we're going to go from that formula down to this formula right here. And VLOOKUP will return exactly the same percentage to every single cell without having to do that huge, long if function. Now, fundamentally, what does VLOOKUP function do? Well, VLOOKUP is looking up a sales number in a bonus commission lookup table and returning one of the bonus percentages back to the cell. So VLOOKUP looked up a sales number and returned something to the cell. In this case, it returned 1%. Now, this is a commission example. There's lots of other amazing examples. Down here, if I hit F2, VLOOKUP is looking up a product name in a product price lookup table and going to get the right price. And then what does VLOOKUP do? It brings that price back to the cell. So both of these examples and many others we'll see in this video. Now, both of these tables are called lookup tables. And the reason that VLOOKUP is so important and so common is because if we go over to the sheet, lookup is everywhere. Lookup is everywhere. Now, what is the price for quad? If I asked you to look in that table, well, of course, you would realize that it's quad, race through the first column, find a match, and then jump over to the third column, which is the price, and then you would say it's $43.95. In the next example down here, if your sales are $36,500 and I asked what commission bonus percentage did you earn, well, you'd look up the $36,500 in the first column of the lookup table. When you found the right row, you jump over to the third column, and your commission percentage would be 4%. In our third lookup table example, if I asked you what Hal Chuck's zip code was, well, you'd look up Hal Chuck's in the first column of the lookup table. When you found the right row, you jump over 1, 2, 3, 4 to the 5th column and get the zip code. Down here, if your income is $3,000 and I asked you what your tax is, well, you'd look up the $3,000 in the first column of the lookup table. And when you found the right row, you jump over to the second column to get the tax of $60. Down here in this lookup table, if I asked what region does Josephina Miles represent, Well, you'd look up Josephina Miles in the first column of the lookup table. When you found the right row, you'd go 1, 2 into the second column, and you'd say, well, she's in the southwest region. Still another example. If your sales are 6,000, what is your commission rate? Well, you look up the 6,000 in the first column of the lookup table, find the right row, jump over, in this case, to the second column, and your commission amount would be $200. And then our final lookup table example, if your sales are 375, what is the category assigned to that sales amount? Well, you would look up the 375 in the first column of the lookup table, find the right category, jump over 1, 2 to the third column, and that would be the category. Every single one of these lookup tables, we're always looking something up, finding a match in the first column, and jumping over to one of the columns, 2, 3, 4, 5, whichever number column it is, and getting something, that 43.95, and bringing it back. In our case, we'll be bringing it back to a cell or a formula. Lookup tables are everywhere. Now, one last thing before we go look at examples 1 and 2. Notice that all the items are listed vertically in every single one of these tables. The vast majority of lookup tables are vertical. That's why they call it V for vertical, VLOOKUP. All right, let's go over to the sheet V12 and look at our first example. Now, actually, on this sheet, I have a bunch of notes up at the top here about what we're going to do. Those are also over in the PDF notes. Now, in our first 1 and 2 examples, we have a product price lookup table. In the first column, we have the name of the product. In the second column, we have the supplier name. And in the third column, we have the price. And our goal in this cell is to have VLOOKUP look up the product name and return the price. Down here, we'll do the same type of formula using this lookup table, but we'll look up the price for each one of the products in this invoice. All right, this will be the first time we've seen VLOOKUP. I'm going to type an equal sign and then VL. Once you type VL, VLOOKUP will always show up in blue from the function drop-down list, so you can hit Tab. Now, there's 1, 2, 3, 4 arguments in VLOOKUP. And we'll go through each one of them one at a time. Now, lookup value. That simply is the item that you want to look up and try and find a match in the first column of the lookup table. So just like we have to know what to go and look up, so does VLOOKUP. That's lookup value. Now we type a comma to get to the next argument. And this argument says table array. Now I always remember what to put into this argument, because as soon as it says table, I know I need to give it the whole table. Now I wish that they called this lookup table instead of table array. So I'm going to highlight the table. And you do not need the field names at the top like you do for a pivot table. You only need the items to match in the first column, and then any subsequent columns of items you potentially want to get and retrieve and bring back to the cell. So we put in the whole table, including the items to match and the items to potentially look up. All right, now I type a comma. Column index number. Now, column index number. If we're looking up this product, we know to look up at the top and say, OK, price is what I need. But VLOOKUP has no idea which one of those columns has the item that it needs to go and get and bring back to the cell. Now, I always remember what goes into this argument because it says col, and col is for column. So column index number. And this is counting on your fingers. Wherever your table is, you always count 1, 2, 3. Since we want price, that's the third column. So I just type a 3 into column index number. Now VLOOKUP knows to always go and get whatever's in the third column. Now, comma. The fourth argument is called range lookup. And VLOOKUP can actually do two types of lookup. Approximate match lookup, that's like the commission lookup. Exact match lookup, that's like what we're doing. We're looking up exactly QUAD and trying to find a match in the first column. Now, true and false, I'm not quite sure why they use true and false. But if you select true, then VLOOKUP knows to do approximate match lookup. If you select false, it knows to do exact match lookup. Now, technically, the way this argument works, if you put false or a 0, then it knows to do exact match. Now, I'm going to backspace for a second and type that comma again. The reason they have this dropdown is to make it easy for people. So if you want to just double click it, boom, that will work. False now tells VLOOKUP to find exactly quad. I like to type a 0. So I type a 0. You're welcome to do it either way. So you could put false or 0. And that's it. Our 4 arguments. Close parentheses and enter. That is so cool. Now I'm going to click over here and type VRang. And when I hit enter, instantly it looks up the right price for VRang. Now that was our first example of doing exact match VLOOKUP to get a product price. I want to do the same exact formula, but I want to do it down here in our invoice. And notice we're going to look up the product. And as I copy the formula down, I'm always looking up the product, trying to get the price from the third column. So we're going to do the VLOOKUP function again. Equals VL. I see VLOOKUP in blue in the dropdown, so I hit Tab. The lookup value, I'm going to use my arrow key. So for this invoice, as I copy it down, the product name will always be 2 cells to my left as a relative cell reference. Comma. Table array. It says table, so I know I need to put the whole table without the field names. The first column and all the other columns. Now I'm copying this formula, so I want to make sure and hit the F4 key to lock it. Now, comma, column index number. VLOOKUP needs to know which one of the columns, 1, 2, or 3, has the price. Since price is in the third column, I simply type a 3. Comma. Since we're doing exact match, I want to look up exactly flying eagle. You either put false or 0. Close parentheses. Control-Enter. And copy it down. That is totally beautiful. Now, I filled out the rest of the invoice, simply multiplying quantity and price and then adding them up down here. But VLOOKUP is totally amazing for invoicing. Now, we got to see a potential problem and then learn about data validation drop-down list. I'm going to type quad and enter. Uh-oh. NA means not available. If I hit F2, that means VLOOKUP tried to look up whatever I put in the cell there in the first column. And since it couldn't find it, it was polite. It says, hey, that's not available. Now, what did I do? What I've done so many times in this class and what we humans do so many times in Excel. I mistyped. I either spelled it wrong, or in this case, I put an extra space. If I backspace and hit Enter, then, of course, VLOOKUP knows exactly what to do. It tried to find QUAD. It found it. It went over to the third column and brought it back. Now, instead of relying on typing, anytime you're doing exact match lookup, and we already have our lookup table, we can add a drop-down list that we can select from only the items in the first column of the lookup table. So you ready? We're going to see how to do this. We're going to select cell E23. I'm going to go up to Data, over to Data Tools, and there it is, Data Validation. If your screen is very small, your button might look teeny like that. But however you do it, select the cell E23, click on Data Validation. Now, Data Validation, Settings tab. We want to look at the Allow. Now, by default, all the cells in the sheet allow any value. But you click this drop down, and you can actually do a bunch of cool things. You can have certain whole numbers, decimals, dates, times, and text length. But what we want is list. Once we select list, the source text box pops up, and we highlight the first column of the lookup table. What this is going to do is this will be our list that will show up in the cell as a dropdown. Now, this dialog box is called Data Validation. That means we want to validate any data that goes into the cell. And that's what Data Validation List will do for us. Now, I'm going to click OK. We're going to come back to this dialog box in just a second. And now there's a drop-down. Look at that. I can select VRang. Oh, that is so magic. Select Carlota, and there it is. Now I'm going to select Quad. Now I want to go back up to the Data Validation dialog box. I'm going to click this button. It opens it, and there's the settings. We can actually add an input message. If I type something like select from drop-down list, and then I'm going to put a little message down here also. Select product name from drop-down list. This will appear every time we select the cell and tell the user of the spreadsheet what they need to do. Not only that, but if you type the wrong value there, we can give them an error alert. I'm going to click in Title, Control-V, because I copied it from over there, and do the same type of message. And so I typed both a title and an error message. Now let's click OK. And look at that. When I click over here, nothing. But when I click here, it totally tells us what we need to do. I'm going to select VRang. Now I'm going to try and type something here that's not in that list. When I hit Enter, look at that. That's our first personalized pop-up message. Select product name from drop-down list. I'm going to say retry. I'm going to delete that and then select from the list. And there we go. Now I want to do the same thing down here for the invoice. So I'm going to highlight a range of cells, go up to Data Validation List. I'm not going to add error alert or input message. You can if you want. Settings, I want to select list. This is so amazing. Source, it's always the first column only. Just a list of names. Click OK. And now in each one of these cells, we have our drop-down list. All right, so that's example 1 and 2. In both of these examples, we did exact match. And we also saw a data validation drop-down list. Now let's go talk about approximate match lookup. I'm going to click on the sheet V34. And what we want to do here is use approximate match VLOOKUP to get a bonus commission percentage. Here's our employees and our sales. And of course, what we want to avoid is F2, that long if function that would have to individually check each one of the conditions in order to get to the bonus commission percentage and then return it back to the cell. Now, the amazing thing when we use the VLOOKUP function is it will totally be able to look this up. And even though I can't find exactly the 17,382, VLOOKUP will know exactly what to do. Now, 17,382, that would fit in this category right here. Now, how does VLOOKUP know when it's looking up this number? How does it know to go to this row and fit into this category? Because VLOOKUP will look this up, race through this first column, which has to be sorted smallest to biggest. It'll actually race through, and when it finds the first number bigger, it jumps back a row. Now, VLOOKUP knows anytime it sees 10,000 here and 20,000 in the next category, it automatically interprets that as, OK, this row is going to be $10,000 or more all the way up to, but not including 20,000. So that means for every single one of these rows, VLOOKUP will interpret it as, well, there's 30,000. That number is included for this row all the way up to, but not including the next number. And that just makes our formula so easy and simple as compared to our if function. All right, we're going to try this. You ready? Equals VL. I see my VLOOKUP highlighted in blue. I hit Tab. Lookup value. Just like for our exact match, we have to look something up and try and find a match in the first column. Now I type a comma. Table array. The word table in the name of the argument reminds me that I have to give VLOOKUP the entire table. We highlight the first column with the items to match and any other columns. Now, I actually added the upper and lower limit category just so we could, as we're learning, use that to understand the category for each row. So really, we don't need this third column. I'm actually, and notice the dancing ants are still dancing, I'm going to highlight the first column and the second column. The second column has the percentages that I want to go and get and bring back to the cell. Now, for table array, I'm copying this, so I need to hit the F4 key to lock it. Now, comma. Column index. Remember, COL reminds us that that's the column. VLOOKUP needs to know which one of the columns, 1 or 2, has the thing that it wants to go and get and bring back to the cell. So I counted on my fingers, and I counted the second column as the column with the bonus percentage commission. So I type a 2, comma. Now, remember, VLOOKUP does 2 different types of lookup. Exact match, that's when you're looking up like text, QUAD, like in our last example. Approximate match, that's always when we have our first column sorted from smallest to biggest. And it will race through until it finds the first number bigger, in our case 20,000, and know to jump back 1 row. Now, actually, technically, that is not how it does it. It does something called a binary search, which is a computer term for how computers do approximate match lookup. But for our understanding, think of it as VLOOKUP's racing through until it sees the first bigger number and jumps back 1 row. So I'm going to choose approximate match. Now, look up here. Just like for exact match, there's various options to tell VLOOKUP that you want it to do approximate match. So for approximate match, you can put true, which means double click, backspace, backspace, backspace. Or you can put a 1, so I can put a 1. Or I can leave it omitted. So the default behavior, if I do not put anything for range lookup, is approximate match. And what that means is if I backspace, backspace, that means I don't even put anything in for that argument. We saw this once before in our class when we used the PMT function, the payment function for a loan. If there's an argument, and arguments that are listed in square brackets always will mean if you know the default, you don't have to put it in. So when we're doing approximate match, we're never going to put it in. Now, I'll leave it up to you. You can comma, put a true, a 1, or don't put anything. I'm always going to not put anything. All right, so we're going to take the default behavior, approximate match, close parentheses, Control-Enter, double-click and send it down, go to the last cell and hit F2. That is absolutely beautiful. We got exactly the same percentage all the way down as our much longer if function. All right, escape. All right, now we want to go look at our example number 4. And this time, I want to use VLOOKUP to get the correct bonus commission percentage for every cell. But then I want to multiply it by the sales to get the actual. And that shouldn't say a percentage symbol. It should say, please calculate the bonus commission dollar amount. All right, so you're ready? We're going to do the same exact VLOOKUP. Equals VL tab, left arrow. I need to have a lookup value to try and match in the first column. So there it is, a relative cell reference, comma. table array. So I remember to put the entire table, not the field names like a pivot table, just the first column and any subsequent columns. I've highlighted 1, 2 columns. Now I come down and hit the F4 key to lock it because I'm copying this formula down. Comma. Column index, I see call. That means I need to count on my finger until I find the column that has the thing I want to go and get and bring back to the cell. 1, 2, so I put a 2. Comma. Oh, yeah, I'm doing approximate match. I'm leaving it out. By the way, don't leave that comma there if you're going to leave it out and assume the default behavior of approximate match. Don't put anything. Don't even put a comma. It's simply close parentheses. And just for a second, admire how short and sweet that formula is. Control Enter. Double click and send it down. I'm going to go to the last cell and hit F2 to verify that the relative cell reference and the locked table are actually working. Now I'm going to come to the top cell in F2. Notice VLOOKUP is just delivering a decimal number to the cell. And don't get tricked by number formatting. Just because this has number formatting and these cells do not, remember, all formulas look at the underlying number. And of course, as we've seen many times in this class, under that percentage number formatting is a decimal. And we want that decimal. We want to use that decimal that VLOOKUP is returning and multiply it times the sales. Just like we did in last video where we had our if, and we took the result of the if and multiplied it by our sales, we're allowed to do the same thing for VLOOKUP. Control Enter. Double click and send it down. Go to the last cell in F2. Escape. Now I see lots of extraneous decimals, but guess what? I am not going to use any of these formula results in any subsequent formulas. So I'm simply going to highlight and add number formatting. If I were going to add these, I would have to round. But I'm not, so I'm simply going to use number formatting. I come up to the dropdown and select currency. All right, F2 at the top. We're totally allowed to use VLOOKUP to do this amazing approximate match lookup and use the result in a larger formula, in our case, multiplying. Now, just to emphasize what VLOOKUP is doing, I'm going to come up to $39,999.99. Notice VLOOKUP returned a 4%. But what did VLOOKUP do? Well, it took that number, it raced through until it bumped into the first number bigger and jumped back a row. That's how it knew how to get that 4%. Now, we've done 4 examples so far. VLOOKUP totally replaced this. And actually, I forgot. I want to go back to V1, 2. Here we use VLOOKUP with exact match to look up exactly quad. But you might be tempted to make the same mistake over here. This is what we never want to do. We never want to have to check every single condition. Anytime we have, in our case, 1 of 5 different things we're putting into the cell, we used VLOOKUP. Over here on V3, 4, when we're doing approximate match, we had 1 of 7 things that we wanted to put into the cell. So instead of checking all 7 things, we used VLOOKUP. All right, let's go over and look at our next examples, V5 and 6. On V5, 6, we have another common example of how to use exact match VLOOKUP. Our goal is to get employee email and phone number. So I need to be able to look up a particular employee name, find an exact match in the first column, and then jump over to the 6th column for email and the 7th column for phone. All right, so I'm going to click here. Cell B16 equals VL tab. I'm going to left arrow because I'm trying to look up an employee name. Sometimes we have an employee ID instead of a name, comma, table array. I have to highlight the whole table without the field names at the top There's the first column to get a match. And these are all the potential columns of things we can go and get and bring back to the cell. Now I'm going to hit the F4 key because I am going to copy this to the side, F4. And I need to go back to lookup value, click, and hit the F4 key to lock that. Because as I copy to the side from the email cell to the phone cell, I need to lock on the employee name. And I very carefully come to the end, and with my I-beam cursor, now I can comma. And for column index number, I need to count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So I need to type a 6 there. The sixth column has the email I want to go and get, comma. I'm doing exact match, so you can put false or type a 0. Both will tell VLOOKUP to do exact match. Close parentheses, Control Enter. And I'm going to copy it to the side. Now, this won't work, but I come here and F2. Now I need to change that column index number. Since phone is in the 7th column, I'm going to type a 7 and Enter. And just like that, I have email and phone number. Now I'm going to click in this cell right here. Remember, when we're doing exact match and we have our lookup table, we might as well prevent errors. Because if I accidentally type a space, those are not available. Control Z to get rid of that space. But it's a simple fix. I'm going to add data validation list to that cell. So I go up to Data, over to Data Tools, Data Validation. Click the drop-down for Allow. I'm going to say List. The source, it's the first column of the lookup table. There we go. Click OK. Now I can simply select Darius. And there we go, the email and the phone number. Now, example number 6, I want to do exact match. I have a list of these employees, and I just need to get their salary from the very last column. I'm counting on my fingers, so that's all the way to the 9th column. Equals VL tab, left arrow, comma, and the table array. I'm going to highlight the whole table all the way to the 9th column. F4 to lock it, comma, column index. The 9th column has the thing I want to go and get, comma, either false or 0 for exact match. 0, close parentheses, Control Enter. Double click and send it down. Go to the last cell and hit F2. That's absolutely beautiful. Escape. Now we want to go to our next example, V7 and 8, and look at 2 other approximate match VLOOKUP situations. Here we have an income amount and a tax amount. So for this income amount, I need to get the tax from our tax lookup table. So you ready? Equals VL tab, left arrow to get that sales number for lookup value, comma. I'm going to select the table, first and second column. I'm not copying it anywhere, so I simply type comma. Column index, well, the tax is in the second column, so I type a 2. And I'm doing approximate match, so I do not need to put anything for range lookup. The default behavior is for VLOOKUP to do approximate match. Close parentheses and Enter. So what did VLOOKUP do? It took that number, went over to the first column of the lookup table, and this column has to be sorted from smallest to biggest in order for approximate match to work. It took that number, raced through until it bumped into the first bigger one, then it jumped back and knew that that was the row and the $120 was the correct tax. VLOOKUP knew that this row was everything from exactly 5,000 all the way up to, but not including 10,000. For all of those numbers, $120 is the tax. Now, our 8th example, here we have, if I control down arrow, looks like we have about 100 records, control up arrow. So this is in payroll. We have the employee and the sales. And in this business, they assign a flat amount for commission. So we need to look up and match using approximate match each one of the employee sales in the first column and return from the second column the commission. So in the top cell equals VL tab, left arrow to get that sales, comma, highlight the table, F4 to lock it, comma, 2, because the commission amount is in the second column. That's what I want to go and get, comma. I am not putting anything for approximate because that's the default. And be sure to not do this. Don't accidentally leave a comma there. If you're going to leave it out, which is the efficient way to create this formula, that's how they designed this function. If you're going to leave it out because you want the default behavior, just don't put anything. Close parentheses. I love it. That is such a beautiful and efficient formula. Control Enter to put the thing in the cell and keep the cell selected. Double click and send it down. I'm going to Control down arrow to the very last cell and hit F2. I'm verifying that the cell references are correct. Escape, Control Home to jump up to the top cell. So we saw another approximate match. It's very common to use approximate match to look for a certain income amount and return a tax or a tax rate. Escape. And we saw payroll table where we needed to get the commission. Now, if we were going to finish this, of course, we add to get the gross pay and then calculate our deductions, our net pay, and so on. All right, we have one last example for VLOOKUP. I'm going to use my arrows to move the sheets, and there is V9. Let's click on V9. Now, this is the same table we had last video. And in last video, we needed to add a sales category. Now, in last video, we used the if function because there was two categories, large and small. But for each sales number, I need to go over to this table using approximate match, race through till I find the first bigger one, figure out which row, go over to the second column, and get that category and bring it back to the cell. All right. Top cell equals VL tab, left arrow to get the sales amount, comma. And watch this. I'm going to use my arrow keys, arrow, arrow. Now I'm going to Control Shift right arrow, down arrow, F4 to highlight that whole table and lock it. That's an alternative method to using your mouse. All right, I have the table, comma. The second column has the category, so I type a 2. I'm doing approximate match, so I simply assume the default, close parentheses, Control Enter, double click and send it down. Now, just like we did last video, now we have added a helper column. And if we needed to create a pivot table, last video we did country code and sales category with just 2. But here, we're not going to do this in this video, but we've added this extra sales category with this criteria, and we could use this new table with the helper column to build a pivot table. All right, there's some homework problems for you to do. And in this video, we saw one of the most important functions in Excel. We used VLOOKUP, approximate match, to populate a new column with sales categories. Back on 7 and 8, we saw how to use approximate match VLOOKUP for taxes and commissions, like in a payroll table. Back on V5, 6, a common example for VLOOKUP is to look up employee information from various columns in an employee lookup table. We also saw how to create a report with employee and salaries. Back on V3 and 4, we saw how to do approximate match lookup to replace this huge if to get a bonus percentage commission. We also saw how to use VLOOKUP in a larger formula to deliver a decimal amount to a formula and then multiply it to get a commission amount. And we started off V1, a very common situation for VLOOKUP. We're looking up a product name in order to get the product price. And we saw down here how to use that VLOOKUP lookup product price formula in an invoice. And to make sure that VLOOKUP is going to not deliver an NA, we saw how to add data validation drop-down list both here and up here. All right, don't forget, if you like that video, be sure to click that thumbs up. Leave a comment and sub, because there's always lots more videos to come from Excel is Fun. And in our next video, Excel Basics 15, we will get to see the amazing Excel table feature. All right, we'll see you next video.